Okay, hello. I think there's only three of you off, but hopefully this should make up for you not being in lessons. So today, oh, yeah, sorry, I don't know how this works very well. It's a new thing for me to do. Right, so today we are looking at anaerobic respiration. So we spent the last two lessons looking at aerobic respiration, and aerobic respiration means with oxygen. Anaerobic respiration then is the complete opposite. It means without oxygen. We're still trying to produce energy, but there's no oxygen involved in this one. So make sure you write your title and date in your exercise books, and then we'll move on. Okay, so there's a starter to do there. So I will read out the questions, and hopefully you can pause it, have time to answer them, and then we'll move on. Okay, so what are the reactants of aerobic respiration? So they're the things that we're reacting together um, during aerobic respiration. So have a go writing those down. You could do this in the back of your book, probably makes more sense than doing it in the front of your book. Okay, so pause it if you need some more time, but the answers are oxygen and glucose. Okay, so during aerobic respiration, we're reacting together oxygen and glucose. Next question then, what do we make during aerobic respiration? So same thing, pause it, write down an answer, and then we'll check through we'll check whether you're correct or not. Okay, so products then, carbon dioxide and water. And you could have also put energy in brackets. Remember, you can't write down energy for definite because there's not a proper chemical formula for it. Third question then, which organisms carry it out? So have a think about that one, write down an answer. All organisms, all living things carry out respiration, otherwise they would not survive. When is it carried out? So think about that one. When do organisms carry out respiration? Write down an answer. All the time. If they didn't carry it out all the time, as we said, they die. Not good. Next one, what is energy used for? This is what we were talking about on Friday, so hopefully you can remember some of the answers. If you're struggling, look in the front of your book, but have a go writing an answer down for that. Pause it if you need some more time. So answers are forming new molecules, growth, repair, keeping warm, and movement. Okay, so the first thing we need to have a go at is defining aerobic respiration. I've attached a worksheet where you need to read through the passage, highlight any words that you don't understand, and obviously I would normally clarify those for you in lesson, but you could use a dictionary on the internet, or look on the internet somewhere else to find those definitions for the words you're not sure about. So on that same worksheet, you should have some questions to answer, and hopefully you'll be able to do that with the information that's on the sheet. And then there are answers here. Okay, so I'm just going to show you the answers, and obviously pause it so you've got enough time to mark your work properly. Obviously this is very different to being a lesson, so it might take a bit of time getting used to this. But as I said, pause it, read through, make sure you've got everything correct. And if you've got any questions or anything you're struggling with, then send me an email. You can through your school email. It should work. If you don't know what my email address is, locker.a@hungerhillschool.com, and hopefully that'll be alright. So moving on then, state the word equation for anaerobic respiration, animals and microbes. So anaerobic respiration also takes place in microorganisms. That's just like bacteria. They're really, really, really tiny organisms. That's why it says micro, in the presence of little or no oxygen. So it says, what is a microorganism? Can you name any? So as I said, it's bacteria. Things like E. coli, salmonella, they're all bacteria, and they all have to carry out anaerobic respiration. So anaerobic respiration in plant cells and some microorganisms such as yeast produces ethanol and carbon dioxide instead of, that should say instead, not instead, of lactic acid. So write down what you think a word equation would look like. So remember, you put your reactants on one side and you draw an arrow, and then you put your products on the other. If you're not 100% sure, here is the answer here. So glucose breaks down, so that's glucose is just a fancy word for sugar, isn't it? breaks down into ethanol and carbon dioxide, and we get some energy released as well. Now, that word equation that we just looked at, so glucose makes ethanol, carbon dioxide, and energy released, is also called fermentation. Um, and some of you might have heard of yeast fermentation in the food industry. I would ask you where you've heard of it, but obviously I can't. So where you would have heard of it before is in brewing, so making beer and alcohol, and bread making. So next section then, write a description of anaerobic respiration of microorganisms in your own words. So include the keywords microorganisms, yeast, ethanol, carbon dioxide, and fermentation. So there's some help sentences here to, well, to obviously help you if you're stuck. And there are some answers for your descriptions here. So obviously you are going to have to pause in between. I do apologise, I've not looked through this lesson in very much detail. So here's what you should have. So anaerobic respiration also takes place in some microorganisms like yeast when there is little or no oxygen. Instead of lactic acid, this produces ethanol and carbon dioxide. The word equation is glucose makes ethanol and carbon dioxide plus energy released. It's also called fermentation, and yeast fermentation is used in brewing and bread making. Now, I would do this, but I'm not going to. All that happens is during this reaction, the respiration of yeast, the balloon goes up, and the reason for that is you're making carbon dioxide. So if we look back at the word equation here, we're making carbon dioxide, which is a gas, which means that the balloon is going to fill up as the reaction takes place. So think about it in terms of why bread might rise. So when you bake bread, you put it somewhere warm and you leave it to rise so it gets bigger. So the reason for that is it's the carbon dioxide being produced, and it lifts the dough of the bread up. If anyone's ever watched Bake Off, then that's why the bread rises. And obviously you leave it in a warm place because it helps the yeast work better. Okay, and the final thing we're going to do is comparing and contrasting aerobic and anaerobic respiration. So you need to think about some similarities and differences between the two processes. So for example, aerobic respiration uses oxygen, anaerobic respiration doesn't use oxygen. So some similarities here. They both break down glucose, they both release energy. Differences then. Aerobic uses oxygen, anaerobic doesn't. Aerobic produces carbon dioxide and water. Anaerobic produces lactic acid in animals. Anaerobic respiration produces ethanol and carbon dioxide in microorganisms. Aerobic releases more energy than anaerobic, and the breakdown of glucose is incomplete in anaerobic respiration and complete in aerobic respiration. And if you don't know anything about lactic acid, it's that thing that gives you cramps when you run too much. You get a buildup of lactic acid and it makes your muscles cramp. So what you are going to do is you're going to use the information on the previous slide, and you are going to answer this question. So it's compare and contrast aerobic and anaerobic respiration. So if you want to write that question down and then go back to the previous slide, you can do. And there's some things here you need to include in your answer. So similarities and differences, and compare the two types for each statement you make. So if you're saying that aerobic involves oxygen, you need to say that anaerobic does not involve oxygen. And if you said that aerobic produces carbon dioxide and water, you'd say anaerobic doesn't produce carbon dioxide and water. In animals, it produces lactic acid, and in microorganisms, it produces carbon dioxide and ethanol. So just make sure you're comparing them. Prompt sheet, I'll put it on Teams for you if you need it. But as I said, you could just rewind and look at those similarities and differences if you wanted to. And finally, it is just marking your answer that you've written. So 1 mark for each correct statement, and it is literally that slide that was on before. So hopefully that makes sense. Any problems, as I said, email me, and fingers crossed it's all right.